Chainlink is the primary oracle that is being adopted within crypto. 30 trillion in transaction value enabled. It has the market share. It is getting the adoption by institutions, by DeFi protocols, providing price feeds to Ethereum mainnet. And so Chainlink, by all hype you can gather online, is the premier decentralized oracle network. But does that mean you should buy Link token? And I kind of want to flip over to something that might be a little bit more helpful to you guys. And I just put this out, and we're going to go through propositional logic, where my statements, my declarative statements, are either strictly true or false. And then we're going to come to some conclusions, because at this point, I am not buying Link token, and that is the conclusion I came to this weekend. And I wanted to show you guys that. And I'm doing a little comparison with Link here, because Bitcoin is the primary blockchain within the crypto ecosystem. It is seeing the most adoption, ETF adoption by public and private. And, eventually, even with the Clarity Act, it could be involved in insurance companies holding Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And so now I want to get into some points that you can follow with me here and see, is Link right for you? Should you buy Link? All right. I'm saying I don't want to buy Link. Well, why shouldn't you buy Link? So let's go through it here. So let's start. I'm talking about being you'll see I'm talking about being a Bitcoin holder and a Bitcoin participant. I'm going to make the argument that you could really only be a Link holder and not a Link participant. So a Bitcoin participant can run a full node or mine with no permission required by any party. So you can run a Raspberry Pi for $200. You can have a Start9 server, and you can run your own node. You can be a node runner and participate and pick whatever software. You can run Bitcoin Core 30, or you can run Bitcoin NOPS, BIP 110. You're able to choose to participate in the decentralization and the security of the network. Because remember, out of the prongs here, out of the three major prongs, what's Bitcoin killing it on? Decentralization and security. What is Chainlink killing it on? It's killing it on security and scalability. That's the other one that, people critique Bitcoin of. So, premise one here, a Bitcoin participant can run a full node or mine with no permission required from any party. That's true. A Link holder cannot stake natively. So if you guys look, the community pool, every time I check, it's completely full. So you can't make your 4% APY a year because the community pool is full. So that is true right now. So technically you can stake, but it's always full. And there's a dilution to Link. So you are not able to keep up. If you want to keep up with the dilution, you have to continue to buy Link token. And I don't want to be that, because, we have portfolios here. And if we have with all these proof of stake altcoins, you're able to keep up with the inflation rate and stake your token to secure the network. With Link, you're unable to. I put P3A right here because it's in two parts, because there is a difference between being a official node operator and then being a permissionless node operator, where you have to be a participant in a Dawn or a DApp. So let's go with P3A here. Official price feed node. To operate as a designated node on Chainlink's official price feed networks, the feeds securing billions in DeFi, admission is curated and gated by Chainlink Labs. You cannot join without their selection. That is true. And so even within, if you want to be a provider with Ethereum price feeds, I believe last time I checked, they have like a 9-member, and that is selected, and 4 of them have the administration requirements to change. You cannot become a Oracle provider for Ethereum price feeds if you're not selected by Chainlink. P3B here, permissionless Oracle validator. Anyone can run a Chainlink node as a permissionless Oracle validator. You deploy the software, fetch data, and provide off-chain computation independently. No approval required. But decentralized applications and Dawns or decentralized Oracle networks choose which nodes they consume data from. If no protocol selects your node, you validate nothing that anyone uses. That is a truth statement. So there's these collections of nodes. You think about Bitcoin and you're a node, you're a participant in the greater Bitcoin network. If you're a Chainlink node and you're running Chainlink Core, you have to be a participant among other nodes in order to provide data for, a decentralized application on a protocol somewhere, somehow. P4 here. A Chainlink holder, this is the big one here, a Chainlink holder, a link holder has no governance vote on any network parameter. Okay. And you might say, well, you don't with Bitcoin. Well, yeah, you do. If you run a Bitcoin node, you are the referee. You get to choose what version of the chain you have on your node. And you're able to choose what software you run, which is the direction. If you've been keeping up with the BIP 110 and the core proposals for quantum computing, their upgrade, you can see there is a bifurcate. There is a fork in the road within these two groups of people that want different upgrades for the network. And so you're able to participate. You're able to be a part of the governance of Bitcoin. With Link, you are not. P5, the top, I was talking with Matt one. I was like, Matt, I don't know how to feel about this, but my first instinct is it's not good. The top 10 Link wallets hold approximately 33% of total supply. 8 of those 10 wallets are Chainlink Labs non-circulating supply addresses, each holding 30 million Link, totaling 24% of the entire supply in 8 controlled wallets. True. P6, continuing on that thought in another premise, 82.7% of Link is held by fewer than 100 wallets per glass node. Of 872,000 total holders, fewer than 0.012% of addresses control the overwhelming majority of the supply. So the rich are getting richer, and you're trying to go along for the ride. So what's my conclusion here? Being a Link holder is you are a passenger. You are not a participant in the network. You are going along for the ride. And so, I kind of list off in that paragraph, a culmination of all these things right here. They hold a token whose value, governance, supply distribution, and fee routing are determined entirely by entities they cannot identify, influence, or override on chain. They cannot stake. They cannot join official feeds. Running a permissionless node earns nothing without selection, and the supply they are buying into is 82.7% concentrated in fewer than 100 wallets, so we keep going on and we're just restating. All right. And so the final thing I want to cap off with here, going into my other conclusion and why I view it through a long-term thesis is, we brought this up in the past, if I step away, if I fall into an illness, I want to be able to make sure that my tokens are going to be there in the long run. I want to have that 10-year thesis. All right. Now, with some of our trades right now, we don't have that 10-year thesis. All right. I don't have a 10-year thesis on Casper. All right. And when price appreciates, you better know I'm going to sell that Casper. And there's other coins out there that are in my portfolio right now that I will sell. But I actually have a long-term vision in Bitcoin, and we can go through the premises right here. Bitcoin's long-term vision is encoded in the protocol. 21 million fixed supply, proof of work security, no central authority, no privileged wallets, cannot be changed without consensus of participants running software. You can be a participant in the governance. The P9, going back to Chainlink, Chainlink's long-term value requires Chainlink Labs to convert enterprise revenue into Link demand through payment abstraction and reserve policy. So like this DTCC partnership, you will not see that within you being a independent node unless you are selected by Chainlink Labs themselves. And I would imagine if you were starting to run a node right now, you would not be selected for how fresh and a new of a node you would be to that, because we're talking about billions of dollars of verification that needs to come by independent Chainlink nodes, and they are in clusters, and you must enter that cluster in order to be a participant. And then the long term, the institutional adoption matters. I know Bitcoiners talk about, wow, we don't need institutional adoption, but it does give it some credibility, not the governance of Bitcoin itself, but what it means in capital markets. Strategy holds 818 Bitcoin. 118,000 Bitcoin as a treasury asset. BlackRock and Fidelity run spot Bitcoin ETFs with billions under assets under management. Harvard's endowment holds Bitcoin. These are the largest capital allocators in the world, making long-term duration institutional bets on Bitcoin specifically. Long-term duration. We're thinking about long-term. Crypto is so volatile. And for you, and these people online that want to make year-end predictions on Bitcoin price or XRP price or Solana price, it's almost laughable, because every time I see someone make a price prediction, they are always wrong. Okay. And so what can you do in crypto? You can make long-term bets. You can make long-term bets on what Bitcoin is going to be. Is Bitcoin going to be digital gold? Is the network going to stay secure? Is it going to remain decentralized? Those are bets you can make by buying Bitcoin, and you can enhance the Bitcoin network by being a participant, by being a node runner, or even mining. P11 here. No equivalent conviction exists for Link as a long-term treasury or endowment asset. True. There's nothing online you'll find of Link, and there's a long-term conviction, because that's what you see within spot ETFs. You see a big institution that's offering a product for people that are interested in buying Bitcoin and holding it for a longer term, you could say, and maybe not for a short-term period, not having using derivatives, but adding Bitcoin, buying Bitcoin, and holding the Bitcoin themselves, and giving exposure to people that don't want to open a Coinbase account and buy the Bitcoin and move it to a non-custodial wallet. So conclusion 2, Bitcoin has a long-term investment thesis that is protocol enforced, okay? So there's a difference here. I did want to show you that difference between Bitcoin and my idea of Bitcoin. You know, I could be right or wrong, but these are statements that I'm saying that are proven false or true. And in the long run, I think Bitcoin will survive, whereas Chainlink will survive. But what does it mean for Link token holders? Link dominates the market, but what does that mean for Link token holders? Does it mean price speculation? Is that really an investment thesis? Okay, so I kind of wanted to leave it at that. Matt, is there anything? Matt, I told you, you gotta give me some criticism on this, because I know most people will probably give it in the comments. You know, I'm comparing Bitcoin and Link here. I'm talking about the things of Link and comparing it to an asset, a digital asset that I know has a long-term vision. I don't know. Can you pin out any holes in my argumentation here?
I think you laid out a lot of really good data. You know, sometimes it just, you read data and you're like, oh, that doesn't fit my thesis. And like, it hurts to read it sometimes, you know? And I think that sometimes people feel that as like a personal attack, but like, that's not how we should be approaching the markets. Just because, you know, information you receive that you research and is objectively true doesn't fit with what you hoped it to be. I think Chainlink as software, as a protocol as a whole, definitely has a very bright future. And I think that Chainlink will see a really nice bull run when we do see the markets really start to flurry a bit here. But you did point to a few points in here that I think people who care about some of the raw portions of DLT and decentralization aren't really there so much. And you know, we've talked a lot about, you know, API 3 versus Chainlink, and they definitely offer different things. You do not have that cross-chain interoperability protocol with the API 3 protocol, but API 3, in contrast, API 3 is both, first of all, an ERC20 token, so they both syndicate their primary value from the Ethereum network. But your API 3 tokens are governance tokens, so you can go and vote on any proposal in the API 3 DAO and participate in the shape of the network. You know, you are a first-party data provider versus Chainlink in this instance. So instead of aggregating data and then running those nodes of a collection of independent nodes, you're essentially providing those data feeds directly, which to some people is a more pure form of essentially contract pulls. Less room for corruption, although Chainlink has really, really good credibility with the amount of uptime they've had and the amount of corruption they've had of their data feeds. And then we also do, again, have those staking rewards. So as there's new emissions that come out with API 3, we are able to participate in that native proof of stake model and offset, if not sometimes gain a bit more out of that difference there. Now, again, like Chainlink, you still will pay in native fees on the chain that you're working on. But, you know, there's always a cost to some of the functionality and some of the additional features that eventually start to be integrated into a lot of these chains. But I think everything we talked about today is completely fair. I don't think that any of this, you know, takes away from the value of what Chainlink provides to institutions, to the ecosystem as a whole. But if you think about yourself as a holder long term, what is my big value? I think people take the governance component in a lot of ecosystems or networks and like, well, if it's not gas, it doesn't matter. Ondo right now is pretty much just a governance token, and people don't see the value in that. I personally see the value in governance over a protocol that is moving around the shaping of how tokenized assets and RWAs operate, you know, within that particular ecosystem. So to each their own. You have to figure out what components are important to you. But like Gav said, you know, there's a lot to consider even when you're thinking about like Bitcoin versus Link. If you're thinking about tokenomics, you're thinking about long-term growth, there's a lot of things to think about with your personal risk tolerance and what your long-term and short-term goals are. And you have to make a decision that's good for you. So this isn't a video to say, screw Chainlink, you guys are all going to go broke holding Chainlink.
The title was certainly saying that though.
And you're just going to get me in slow-mo, sorry Chainlink. But you know, we just want to prevent you guys with as much data as possible. And that's what we do at CryptoCharge.com. It's not to, you know, force you guys into our opinions or to tell you guys the assets that we are in, the only good opportunities out there, but to show you guys how you need to be picking apart each project, and after all of that stripping is done, being like, okay, this is a good opportunity for me. And if that's the situation for you, fantastic. You've done your due diligence and you're aware of everything, including the good, bad, and the ugly.